Hello, good afternoon from Kigali. This is Daisy Diamante Leoncio. I'm the Regional Communications Officer of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So welcome to FB Live. We are streaming live from Kigali, Rwanda, where the African Union, together with the government of Rwanda, is hosting the Youth Conference, which is Youth Employment Conference here in Kigali. So it's happening starting today until tomorrow, and we are expecting, and actually they are here right now, there's more than 400 to 500 youth entrepreneurs who came here at the Kigali Convention Center to look into innovations and creative ways in finding solutions for solving poverty and hunger here in the region. So we have been talking that agriculture has always been here since time immemorial. You know, civilization started with agriculture. But here in Africa, there's 1.2 billion people, and 60% of them are below 25 years old. And for some reason, agriculture is such a wing of Zimbabwe and a successful entrepreneur in Southern Africa. And on my right side is Dieudonné. Did I say your name right? So Dieudonné has a very good chili pepper farm, and he's the founder of Gashora Farm. So he buys from 1,000 farmers for export and processing of his chili. And just before we started this session, he was giving me the technical description of his chili. So there are three different kinds of varieties to it, and even grades. And there's, the second grade can be exported into chili oil. The rest is fresh, and the other one is some other things. But we will hear from him shortly. So the use of technology and innovation in the last couple of years have prompted a new generation of youth entrepreneurs who have gone back to agriculture as a source of opportunity. So this is a prime example. The two people with me right now will give you their stories on how they went back to agriculture as a source of livelihood for them, and also a source of inspiration for the youth in this region. So, however, before we would like to start, I would like to remind the audience to send in their questions through Facebook in the comment section. And if you have any questions to two of our rock stars here, please send them to us and we'll make sure that we cover them. So we'll start with the questions. Perhaps I would start with Dieudonné, and he's also known as Diego. That's what he told me 2 seconds ago. So how do you think innovation is transforming agriculture and creating opportunities for the young people in this region?
Thank you. I think innovation, I will start maybe for what we are doing as innovation, what we are bringing in the sector. As you said, the Gashora farms, we export chili. Mainly we export fresh chili to the UK market and dry chili to different countries such as India. So then, as you know, the export markets require, they give you the conditions. So those first grade after, like what the international market is looking for, after getting them, we have the second grade. So with this, we might find like even in Rwanda, we count 30% of losses of chili. Okay. So we come up with this idea, how can we solve this issue of 30% losses? Now we brought up a product called this chili oil. This chili oil is made by those second grade chili which couldn't be exported, and we transform them into chili oil. So that's kind of innovation we are bringing. And also another innovation we are seeing in the sector is to see some people are bringing some platforms where people can even access the market. For us, we will start depending on the middleman, and some of us even are starting still depend on the middleman. So ICT is an innovation, is trying to bridge this gap of middlemen, where someone can even use his phone or his laptop and get access to the market, can get even access to inputs, the packaging he wants can get to and purchase on online. It's kind of innovation which we are trying to see in agriculture. Cultivating, we no longer some of us using the hoe to cultivate. We see the mechanization. We see them to cultivate. If you could even spend the whole day not even finishing 1 acre, now we can cultivate about more than 30 acres with that technology. So we are seeing to see many innovation bringing in agriculture.
So that's a fantastic perspective of how you entered agriculture from a more technological approach. And it's like you mentioned something about, you saw something, a niche in the market, the second grade type of chili. What can we do about it? And that's when you decided to venture into the chili oil business, which was surprisingly quite lucrative for you. So thanks for sharing that story. So moving on to my colleague here from Zimbabwe, just a brief background about her bio. She has always been, you have an agricultural background, that's correct. And she was in the private sector before she went back home to Zimbabwe. She was working in the United Kingdom, and she was working for a private firm that is into the mechanization of the machines that are being used in agriculture. So going back to my original question, which I relayed to Jadoni right here. So what are these innovations that you saw that sort of inspired you to go back to your agricultural roots and say, it is my turn to go back into my dreams and see if I can make it?
Okay, right, absolutely. So, agriculture, just growing up, you see a lot of agriculture that was not so sophisticated, as in people would use hand hoes, very mechanical, very tough. And going to the UK, I got to understand, especially working for the company I was working for, just the efficiency that innovation in agriculture has, and that you don't really have to struggle so hard to be able to produce yields. So those are sort of the innovations that which we really are promoting young people and people in Africa to really take on themselves and see that these are solutions to increase yields. Like, for example, traditionally, people plant using a hand hoe, and they place the seed and then the fertilizer. But then, a planter can just do that for you, and it's more faster, more efficient. You get better results and better yield. And there's always this crazy saying that says that the harder you work, the more productive you are, which is actually the opposite. The harder you work, the less productive you are. So I think people knowing that it's not about breaking your back. Agriculture is not necessarily about being painful, but it can be really interesting and fun. There's so many interesting things coming out. We're driving tractors here in Africa, but in the United States, they're using GPS-driven equipment. So there's a lot of fun and innovative approaches that we can really take it upon ourselves as young people and make agriculture more attractive and much more fun than it currently is for a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good way of saying agriculture is fun. So at this moment, I would like to greet all our audience. I believe that they're watching us from Cambodia, Colombia, Brazil, and Kyrgyzstan, and I'm assuming 100 other countries. So we're live from Kigali at the moment, and I'm interviewing two of our very, very creative youth entrepreneurs, and they have such good stories for us to share. So if I move on to the next question. So you mentioned it earlier that agriculture is not very attractive to the youth. So how can we make them stay and invest in the sector? Because, if I come from a farming family myself, and it's like it's a very hard push to get me back into farming, and I still have a high interest about it, but making me stay there is a little bit difficult. So what do you think are some of the ideas that you have? How can we make them stay and invest in the sector, emotionally invest as well as financially?
Yeah, thank you. I think what we can do, first of all, youth don't consider doing agriculture as a priority, because some of them, they have their dream job that they are planning to do when they are finishing school. But what you can do is just take those who have started, help them to bridge all those challenges they are facing, then use this to inspire others who are coming. If they see me, I'm successful, I'm driving to go to my farm. Even I will be a role model to the young youth who say, after me graduating, I also do the agribusiness, because this guy now he has a good life. I need to also to do agriculture. And use people like some of people who are very successful to inspire others. Use social media, social media too, because most of the youth have access on smartphones.
Yes.
Use social media to advertise how opportunities in agro-businesses. So, of course, we need to first help those people who are already in the business, help them to not back, because some of them, they might, they reach a point and they fail. And if they fail, it will discourage so many youth. So it's better we help those who are started and then use them to inspire others using all the tools like ICT, social media, and everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a wonderful story. It is indeed. During my generation, it's not too long time ago, hopefully, but social media didn't exist, and there was no inspiration for me to go back into farming. But right now, they see how successful you are. Information is disseminated into a fast pace. You have all these Twitter accounts, those Facebook accounts where you can share information. So we can have that information disseminated into the youth, and they'll be so inspired about it. So in your case, you mentioned it earlier, like agriculture is not about backbreaking work. And how do we go back to our young people right there and tell them, really, it's fun. It's not that difficult. We just have to invest in the right way and get the proper support and perhaps have the personal investment into it.
Yeah, absolutely. How I would tackle it to the young people is, agriculture is $1 trillion business, right? And we're not talking about primary. I think a lot of the times people think that when we're saying agriculture, we mean just primary production. Not everyone has to be in primary. There's so many fun things that you can be involved in, but still be in agriculture. Like maybe your passion is in marketing, but have you ever thought, how can we better market agriculture so that it's our products are more attractive on the shelf so that we can then penetrate into international markets? Already you're in agriculture and you're taking part of that $1 trillion. Or you could be in communications, and how can we better, or even logistics, because right now logistics is a big, big problem, and everyone expects us farmers to solve our own logistical problems, but there are people who are studying logistics. Why can't you think of how can I then use my logistical skills to solve the challenges of moving product from the farmer to the market? So I think when we just say agriculture and primary production, I think we're wrongly marketing it. I think agriculture is holistic. There's so many areas. There's finance. How can we look at innovative models for funding of small scaleholder farmers or commercial farmers or whatever? So there is a lot of that young people can take part and really support the sector and see it grow and become the vision that everyone visualizes that it will be very successful in the next few years.
Quite eloquently said. It's a 360-degree, perspective of the agricultural sector and how we can bring in the youth back. So let's step back for a moment. When you first started your venture back into the agricultural sector, I am sure that both of you started your careers in the private sector, which a lot of our youth entrepreneurs are, experiencing right now, and then they decide to move back into agriculture. So what were the early challenges that you have? You're quite successful right now. You buy the products of more than 1,000 farmers and you export all over Europe. So at the beginning of your business, what were the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah, thank you. As you said, most of us started with private business. By the way, I did agriculture at university. After that, I worked a bit of time at petroleum processing plants in Rwanda. There, I had to quit and go pursue my passion because I want to work on my own. So the first challenge I faced was to get the reliable market, because I started with the tomatoes, melons, and then some of them we could make money. Next time you lose because there is no data, or there's no data that can help you to anticipate or to project. Say, for example, when I was losing money in tomatoes, other people were getting money in carrots because there was a shortage of supply. Next time when we are getting money in tomatoes, others are losing in carrots. So the first challenge I made was to get the reliable market and also to get the data. So also to get the right information, because sometimes someone could tell you to start with 1 hectare you need this $1,000, for example. After starting, I got so many unexpected costs. So I end up starting tell someone, can you lend them this because I'm about to lose this, I'm about to lose. So I'm saying the first challenge was to get to the market and to get the right information, where you get the inputs, where you get the right investment you need. So that was the first challenge I faced when I started the business.
Okay, I think you accurately described it, because access to information is such a huge challenge for us to face, especially when you're entering into a new market, into a new fresh career for you. So this is like a steep learning curve. So before we move back to those challenges, we had a question that came in. So the question was, what should you think about privatization in agricultural education? So perhaps, Ruramito, you can take a stab at this question. So what are your thoughts in privatizing agricultural education?
I actually think that it is already privatized. The school I went to it wasn't a government institution. So I think I don't see any harm in it. I think there should be different ways of delivering education in agriculture, in the agriculture sector. So I think absolutely, if there's an opportunity, and it should be taken. Yeah.
Okay, so it's happening right now in Africa. There's quite a hybrid of this type of agricultural education.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely.
All right. So the other question that we have is, it's almost similar to my questions earlier about the challenges. So we'll switch to the more positive part. So what do you think is the most rewarding about working in agriculture?
I think, okay, to start off with, the most rewarding was being able to see your harvest, because it's really a game of faith, right? Because you plant something and you hope it grows, and then there's so many variables, climate, there's pests and diseases. So actually seeing a harvest and seeing a satisfied customer is absolutely the most rewarding. But now I think the most rewarding for me is actually seeing other people being able to then be inspired by what I've done, and being able to then succeed in themselves. So I would say the most rewarding for me right now is being able to see other people do even better than me, being able to start from very little and be able to succeed. That is the most rewarding thing for me right now.
Absolutely brilliant. So it's not just rewarding, but inspiring. You inspire them, and then you get rewarded back in return. So we have a question from Chol. During your farming years, did you ever have issues in drought, bad soil that killed the crops, pests that ate your crops? And what about climate change? So how did you deal with them?
Yeah, good question. For me, about the climate change, the issue I had, because I was dealing, since I started agribusiness, I was dealing with the horticultural crops. And I know that the first condition you need to have, for example, the permanent source of water. So you need to have the kit for irrigation. For me, I didn't have any issue of drought. But the issue I had with my business was, first of all, the pest. You could find a pest in your tomato crops, and because we don't have the role models in Africa, just you can have this pest. What can I do? So I had to use my network, try to, you get the pest to control it later after losing some of your producers. About the climate, one day, in Rwanda we have a short dry season starting mid-December up to February. So last year we were expecting to have that season, and it's changed. It had rain. So for us, we were expecting to export the chili, which was dried. Now it was hard to dry in that kind of period because we are using sun dry. So that's a kind of change we are facing, but that's also the challenge we are facing as an SMEs. But the way of moving forward is just trying to find dryers, but it requires, of course, much investment. But those are the challenges I face: the pests and the heavy rain unexpected.
All right. So, we all have these challenges, and in particular, I can see that agriculture has a host of challenges as well. As you say, it's all about faith, right? You hope and you pray for that the crops you planted, you can harvest them. So, can you tell us a little bit about the crops that you plant in your farm? And it's a little bit similar to his question, what are the challenges that you faced early on? And the lessons that you learned that you will, you won't do it again, or probably you will carry forward and relate to other young farmers.
All right. I could go the whole day talking about
sure
the challenges that I face. I face so many challenges. Even starting on earlier on, I did a chicken project. I think it was, I was actually working in partnership with other people. And, that was a disaster. Our system was not intact, and we lost so many birds just because of poor housing facilities. And that was the first. And then I've also done potatoes, and because of not good quality seed, we lost a lot. I've had challenges of armyworm. Even this past season, armyworm is something that we haven't really found a solid solution to. And we've had armyworm, but luckily enough, because of the support now, and we've been able to effectively manage that. But then that is definitely a challenge, finding an armyworm in your field, and it's going to eat up all your crops. In terms of droughts, the climate has not been very easy in Zimbabwe. Our rain patterns have not been frequent. So that has also been a challenge that we've had to face. But fortunately enough, we've been able to install irrigation facilities But in terms of other challenges, there's so many challenges in agriculture, and this is really a sector that needs a lot of support in terms of information dissemination, in terms of developing the sector so that farmers do have equipment to be able to prepare them for such things like spraying of pests and diseases, being able to scout early and all that. So yeah, I've had lots of challenges. The crops that I had armyworm were the maize that I just recently sold, luckily enough. But we had armyworm this year, and we had to take care of it.
Yeah, the fall armyworm,
Yes.
the scourge of Africa, huh? So, so we're still talking about challenges here. So we had another question. By the way, for those who are just tuning in, please feel free to put in any questions on the comment section, and we'll take them in. And I have two young innovators with me who can gladly share their experience with you. So the greatest challenges, as we mentioned quite a few, is the inability to raise funds, to modernize the equipment, also at the same time to commercialize it. So how do you think governments or the partners or even the development sector will even include FAO? How can we help young innovators like you? So Dieudonné, maybe perhaps you can give us your ideas on how the governments can help you better.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I think after a youth has started his business, has verified his model, the government should understand him where she or he wants to go. For example, let me give an example. If I will talk about the secondary grade, it's not easy starting myself, building a warehouse, having a dryer to avoid those kind of climate change issues. So I think after the youth has done his model and is verified and showing that he can sell his product, or even I think the government can even help him and even make your product more look standard, improve the standard, and then help you raising the fund. And because some of the countries like Rwanda, we have the granting fund.
All
so
right.
I think that not many countries they are, even in Rwanda, but you want to see this working. They are there, but you want to see the government put them in the implementation is being done. Because there are so many good policies for engaging the youth. But you want to see this happening. They have to, because they wait the youth to go and reach out to them. And you find some people, the youth are doing in their rural area, they're doing their own farmers, they're dealing with their issues. There's no way the government should go and approach them, find them where they are, see where they are, and see how they can take them to another stage. So I think that's what the government should do.
I think we heard you correctly. There's a lot of brilliant and excellent policies by the governments and also a host of other stakeholders, but sometimes youth engagement in terms of the implementation, how we can bring them in, needs a little bit more work, right?
Yeah.
So, so going to you again, Rurami, so how do you think that the governments and the development sector can help young farmers, young innovators, the youth entrepreneurs go back into the sector and invest in it?
Right, that's like $1 million question.
It is, yes.
So for starters, we need good funding models. Funding is too expensive. It's too much. Financing is too expensive. Like I remember talking to someone from Netherlands, and they said agriculture financing is 1%. I've never been able to find 1%, 20%, 30%. It's too expensive. So if government really wants to support young farmers, they need to be able to provide a good funding models. When I say good, I mean one, cheap, so maybe like 1% or 0, ideally. They need to then also be able to fund holistically. Holistically, we need funding for capex, which is long term. We need funding for working capital, because a lot of the times as a farmer, you only get paid once at the end of the year. So we need funding models that are long term, not 4 months, because 4 months I will not be paid yet. I need to still survive. So I believe that government to support young farmers need to have good funding models. Then I also believe organizations, there's a lot of money in capacity building. Our capacity is built, we go for trainings, but then that's it. There's no follow-up. I think that it's better to capacity build the few and then help them develop their projects. And then you have the success. Because when your capacity is built and then you're left there, then there's no really much gain. So that's what I believe is a way to solve this challenge.
And I think you said it in such a way that, it captured a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing right now together, with the governments and also the development sector. which is you touched on something which is right into the next question, what are the measures that the government have taken in place, or your country, for example, to promote the continuity of agriculture? You mentioned long-term financing. You also mentioned capacity building and more engagement with the youth in terms of the implementation. So we're taking in a couple of more questions, or one or two more questions, because we have to wrap up. As she said, it's $1 million question. We can stay here for 48 hours and we will still have a very dynamic conversation, but alas, we can't do that. So for the last question, so what would you advise to your young self, or probably another young agricultural entrepreneur entering into the sector? What would be your advice to that person?
Right. I think to the young people, my advice would be, if you really want to do it, firstly find who else is doing it. Because looking back at my young self, I think I started without much mentoring. Find who else is doing what you're doing and try and learn from them. That's my advice. Learn from them and see what is needed. Is this really a viable business? Can I do it? Who can I partner with? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you? So,
my advice to tell them, is to tell the youth opportunity is where you can start with the small capital you have. But first of all, as she mentioned, that they need first to find the real information. After finding real information, start your small. Start small. Because before you start, someone could tell me, like, you have to start small. I couldn't understand this. But start small. Don't rush. If this goes well, the model is verifying, you are learning, you are getting your team to help you working, then scale up. After even, I always tell people, even if the financial companies or banker not yet to fund us, if you have a really good model, even in your days you can invest in it, because you are very busy with your job. But if I come and tell you, like, look, I've invested this 100, for example, I've gotten 1,000 in 4 months. Yeah. If you help me, this can scale up this and you can get this. I think you can invest in it, because I will just ask you to invest a bit of Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What I hear is about, not just about financial investment, but there's also a lot of emotional investment into it. So, ladies and gentlemen, Africa has always been the sharing of stories. So right now, the past 30 minutes, we heard these fantastic stories from our partners here, and they're quite inspiring. If you have any further questions, please leave them at the comment section, and we will try to answer them through Facebook. So thank you once again for joining us for this Facebook Live session. It has been enjoyable. I have the privilege of continuing the conversation with them, but definitely would like to hear more about your stories. So for more information on how FAO is supporting governments and the young people of the world, please visit us at FAO.org. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and on Twitter at FAO. So thank you very much. We are live from Kigali. My name is Daisy Diamante Leoncio. I'm the Regional Communication Officer of FAO. Thank you. For the youth employment and agriculture conference, which is happening right now. We are bringing in more than 400 youths to this